This is the Therapy Chat Podcast with Laura Reagan, lcsw-c. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. And now, here's your host, Laura Reagan, lcsw-c.
Hi, welcome back to Therapy Chat. I'm your host, Laura Reagan, and today I'm very happy to be here with Eugene Ellis. Eugene, thank you so much for being my guest on Therapy Chat today.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Laura.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. One of the things that we're going to talk about is your second book, right?
Well, this
First
is
book?
the first book. It's been re-edited for America.
Okay. So your book, Transforming Race Conversations, a healing guide for us all. And I really appreciate how you bring in the somatic aspects of the challenges in talking about conversations that are uncomfortable because they're unfamiliar and they're laden with much history and much emotion. So that's one of the things that we're going to talk about. But before we get into it, can you start off by just letting our audience know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yes, I am a psychotherapist. So I trained as an integrative art psychotherapist, which is, I think it's probably a sort of metaphor, I think is a good way to kind of summarize what I do. So there's lots of talk in what I do, but when talk breaks down, which it often does, either it goes round and round in a circle or there are no words, we'll bring in some kind of metaphor, a third object, and we'll sort of explore that object, whatever it might be. It could just be a card with an image on it, or it could be something very elaborate, made with paint, or it could be just an image in the mind. So that's kind of how I trained. And when I finished training, I worked in adoption. So when I started, it was attachment theory was the main thing people were thinking about. And as things kind of progressed, it was clear that attachment theory certainly wasn't quite meeting the parts we needed to reach, especially with that particular cohort, very traumatized young people. And a lot of the things that were happening in the States around trauma then sort of came into our service. And I was quite lucky, I think, because I did a lot of study with a lot of cutting edge clinicians at the time. Dan Hughes, who works in in that adoption field, used to come to where we worked and sort of give lectures, and we did some of these courses. And of course, Van der Kolk and all of the those guys doing trauma. So I got a good base, a good base in all of that. And what was really great about that was that I could actually see myself. I could see the therapy. I could see, okay, the child or the parent or someone in the family was doing something with their bodies. And it just, just that kind of language of trauma, neuroscience just really gave a perspective to the work. And, where should my body be in the room compared to theirs? Should I look at them? Can I go sideways? What's the quality of my voice? All of those kinds of things really came to the fore in terms of what I was doing in the room. So that was really good grounding and training. And while I was doing adoption, I was also when I finished my training, actually, I got quite a few requests for therapists of, say, African heritage or Caribbean heritage. And I just assumed that there'd be some kind of web service or database or something online that people could go to maybe find someone that matched. But anyway, there was nothing. Certainly in the UK, I thought there must be something in America, surely. In the US, again, that wasn't there either. So I was quite like, I was a bit, and so I was a bit struck by that. But so I got some funding, a small bit of funding, and I just created a database basically of therapists who from those heritages, and it was so I put some adverts in some of the journals, therapy journals in the UK, and people sort of signed themselves up to this kind of notice board essentially. And that was as far as I was going to take that, because then I could refer clients. So that was my main aim. Oh, we could just go to this database and you can find someone. And then someone I think it got to about 100, and I was wondering how many therapists of color are there in the UK, I wonder. So we got to about 100 people, and then someone mentioned, oh, why don't we meet up? That's a great idea. Why don't we meet? Where I was working, they sort of very generously gave us a room to use, and we had our first conference, so about 20 people, 25 people or so. And it's only when we came together, that it became a kind of like, we need to do more of this. But before coming together, it's not something that sort of struck, you know what I mean? It wasn't like something that I felt I needed to do, or we needed to do in a sense. Of course, it's obvious now, but it was only just coming together, and it sort of happenstance really that we just came together. And then all of a sudden, something just kind of sprung into life. People said, well, why don't we try to support students coming through? Because anecdotally, there were lots of stories about, students of color doing therapy training. The race thing comes up and everything blows up. And they get the rough end of the stick. And they can either stay and sort of just grind it out, or they can leave, maybe go to another course. Anyway, it was problematic. And so we started a mentoring project that basically mentored. So people who'd been through the training could then mentor new students going through the training. And there's the program that's been running for quite a while now, maybe 12 years or so. We call it Each One, Teach One. So that's a sort of saying in the Caribbean that we've kind of, I'm not exactly sure where it came from, but it's just something that's just kind of in the air. So and then from there, it's just been a series of people saying, "Oh, why don't we do this?" or "Why don't we do that?" And they don't just say it, but they have the energy to actually go and lead a piece of work. And so now we have. We've still got the directory. It's a bit more fancy now, and there's maybe 900 or so therapists on there.
Wonderful.
And membership. It's a membership organization, so we get funded. We get funds through our members, so they pay a membership fee. So we're not. We do get some funding for various things, but we can just keep going. As we are, and so we do trainings, and we do. There's the website that we have is sort of been, it's creaking at the seams with so much stuff on this thing, and I'm having to think about it's all going to fall over at some point, and I have to get someone to sort it out. But for now, it's still hanging in there. It's got videos, it's got blog posts. I mean, you could spend many an hour in there. And if you become a member, you can actually there's a little section there. You can see videos of the various conferences that we've had over the years. Basically, really, it's kind of, the image that I had of this when I thought, oh, maybe this could be a thing, was a shop window. And people just sort of just in the high street and people just walking past, and then they just sort of turn and they kind of look in, and they like this looking through the window, and they think, what's going on in there? There's people like me, really proactively looking at their mental health, and they seem to be doing okay in there. And and I wanted to sort of make it enticing so people go to the website and it sort of hopefully immediately they're sort of welcomed in. And I was kind of keen to keep the welcome really, really welcoming for anyone who arrives on the page. Yeah, so you don't feel alienated as soon as you come onto the page. And I think that kind of Pied Piper kind of thing has been quite the cornerstone, really, that really want to make people feel like they could be part of this. So there might be someone thinking of becoming a therapist, or there might just be someone who's looking for therapy, or just looking for some ideas to think about things, and they can just go to the website. It is UK focused, so there are we've tried to sort of build up a library of the UK experience, as therapists talking about that from that perspective. So that's very much about the colonial or decolonizing kind of area and experience. People coming from the colonies to Europe and the UK, and what that experience has done to the race conversation. Going back, of course, to slavery as well, all that stuff sort of coming in. And the very different kind of way that race gets expressed in the UK and in Europe as well. And which again is, I've been looking at various countries in the UK, in Europe, and it's there's a lot to say about it. But there's not much to say, to be fair, because they just have I think actually both UK and Europe, UK and US have quite a sort of history of keeping statistics and doing kind of research around this, and really kind of counting the numbers. And I guess, the US is a kind of was born out of that kind of European experience. So it's hardly surprising. But in Europe, I think there's a sort of more of a sense of, well, let's just not talk about it, and hopefully it will just go away. So I think that's kind of the general sense I get. There are areas that might be quite progressive, but countries as a whole in Europe don't tend to kind of organize, have a sort of organizing structure around even the nature of the problem, the depth of difficulties and things like that. But so Barton, as we call it, the Black African and Asian Therapy Network, we've been running for 22 years. And it was just one guy, just me running it in my spare time. I was working full time at the same time. Then COVID, and then I was going to go in private practice, full on. I was going to press the accelerator of that kind of way of working in the adoption field, and then COVID came, and it sort of changed everything, really. First of all, couldn't work in the way that I want to. Working online with my client group was a challenge. It was possible, but certainly coming back into face-to-face, being in the room, my body, your body, that's really where it's at for me. So I had to sort of pull back a little bit, but also George Floyd, who was murdered by the police, and that had a big impact on me, on many of my colleagues, and also the network, Barton network. All of a sudden, I was servicing lots more members. I mean, literally, we just grew exponentially. We were doing loads of things online. People, we were doing things in person for the most part, and then it became okay to go online. It wasn't just the cheap version of therapy. It was the only way. And then we had all these people coming from various parts of the world come to join us. So we kind of expanded a little bit. And then, but my role has been really kind of sort of working with that and basically doing that full time for the most part and pulling right back from direct work. So I have a small caseload, but which is great. And yeah, it feels a real privilege to be able to bring to life therapists of color in the UK. It's bring to life their whatever it is that they kind of would like to do. So we're kind of not a full service agency, but if someone had an idea, we really try to sort of make it happen. And it might be going on a march, or it might be doing a training or a series of trainings, advertising that within the network, getting people kind of involved, doing conferences, doing a book. We've kind of put a book together called Therapy in Color,
nice.
where we just got loads of members to write different chapters. So yeah, so it's very active and very satisfying, really, to be doing that work in that way.
It sounds beautiful, and I just have to congratulate you. 22 years of leading this, mostly in your spare time until more recently. That's incredible. I mean, that takes so much dedication and commitment and time and energy. But I'm also just really grateful to have learned about it and hope that even by us having this conversation, more people in the UK and around Europe who may be needing the support that your organization offers, whether people searching for therapy or therapists who could use the support. I love that this exists, because I've been saying with my trauma therapist network, as I mentioned before we started recording, that there's it's hard for people who have trauma and complex trauma to find therapy in the UK that's really responsive to their needs for bottom up treatment. And in my experience, which is limited, but I've been to England twice in the past couple of years. So, talking to a lot of therapists around there, it appears very Eurocentric and white centric, the way that the culture of therapy is. So for anyone who isn't part of that group, you're on the margins, and then the valuable contribution that you want to make and can make is not seen or not able to be found. So it's a wonderful thing that you've created.
Yeah. I think when people who hadn't heard of it before, especially if they're in the UK and especially if they're therapists of color and they hear about us, it is like it's just like they found some kind of treasure or something. It's like, I can't believe that this was here for so long and I didn't. And I keep on hearing that from different people as they sometimes those people engage and they'll come to events and things like that. But even if they don't, I think that idea that it's there's something about that. And I'm reminded of there's a place in the UK. I live in London, and there's a centre in London called Nasiat, which is a therapy centre that's been around for years and years and years. they have therapy in different languages. They really think about, what it's like to be a refugee, or what it's like to be moving from one country to the next, what it's like to be racialized and live in the world. And so that's been going on for, I've never been there. I mean, I've sometimes hired the rooms occasionally, but I remember when I was training, that place was the only place that was around that I knew who was doing anything like that. And the fact that it existed was more than enough for me. I didn't need to go and use the study or do anything particularly with it. And I just think having those kind of things there, those kind of places there, can be really kind of, there's something healing in that just in itself. I mean, we've had our conference. We have a conference every April, and we meet in the central of UK, sort of, and we've had 144 people in the conference, and just being in that room with everyone, it really is just something you can't talk about or describe. Something happens in your body. There's a sort of sense of resonance, I guess, with everyone. I mean, it's, even within that group, there are complexities and difficulties, but I think there's that's a particular body experience which is hard to get anywhere else, really. And people feel very, I think they describe it as being at home, especially with so many people, and you're bound to find someone who kind of has perhaps more resonance than others in the space. But yeah, and I think I'm really proud of where we've got to, and what else could happen. I mean, more recently we've got a counselling sort of intro counselling course. It's called Decolonising Therapy. Okay. And the idea is, well, there's a couple of ideas. The first is a preparation. It's only a 10-week course. A preparation to train as a therapist. I can't tell you, a lot of people of color from African heritage, Caribbean heritage, Asian heritage, they go to train, and the first year is almost like a reorientation to this world almost. And I wouldn't say they've wasted a year, but there's quite a lot of having to kind of reorganize yourself. And I think there's quite a lot of sort of positive, maybe a positive view on the therapy world. And obviously, if you're going to train as a therapist, you want to have a sense that it's going to be helpful and useful. And their job is to work with distress, isn't it? So it's natural to think that they could there's going to be some hope there. And then you're also invited to talk about who you are and bring yourself into the room, talk about your identity, all that. And then with that invitation, you say, yes, this is my experience as a black man, as a black woman, or whatever. And this is kind of my experience of being in the world. The very thing that's been asked for is the very thing that is kind of just almost feels like it brings the house down. It's either silence, there's sort of tumbleweed moment where you can just, no one says anything. Even the facilitator or the trainer doesn't seem to know what to say next. The whole, the floor opens up and you kind of think, oh God, I wish I hadn't said that. And all of a sudden you're just kind of into something, and it can take a while to kind of, sort of reorientate, get your mind into what you're doing, make some decisions about how much to disclose, how much to say about your experience. So the course is a kind of it's kind of putting the color back into therapy, if one of a better phrase. I mean, because I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with a lot of the ways of thinking about how humans are with each other. I mean, that's what lots of theories around, isn't it? It could be attachment theory, or it could be Gestalt or TA or whatever. The experience of a person of color is not I think there's a sort of sense that we don't really want that to exist. We want everyone to kind of use the same theory and get what I get a lot out of it, so you should be able to get a lot out of it as well. So that's really, really strong. Also, the political, leaving politics out of therapy, that's very, very strong as well. Let's keep that out of here. That's just going to contaminate the space or something. But for a lot of people of color, they're when they're in their homes, the attachment is fairly okay with their parents and siblings. I mean, we all have some issues, but I mean, I think the attachment wound is actually with society itself. So it's when coming out of the house, and that isn't even sort of mentioned as a thing. So, and that's where a lot of Black people, Asian people, that's where they, that's a wound, that's there. Not to say there's not internal wounds as well, interfamilial wounds as well. That's a given as well, isn't it? But so there's like two fronts. But yeah, putting the color back in is also using or considering at least different theories from different places. The idea of how do people from indigenous cultures, or maybe how do people from African cultures or Indian, Chinese, what's their worldview of mental health, and how is it different from ours? Really kind of not privileging necessarily, although we are in Europe, so we do to some extent have to privilege that experience because we're here and we're living it all the time. But to sort of bring in some of those others, so it's a very small course. It's 10 weeks, it's 38 hours. So it's not a lot, but hopefully it will prepare people if they want to go on to train a therapist, and hopefully they can sort of go into the space with open eyes and open ears. And also the sense of being alone is quite strong with people doing training even now. And they don't have to be alone, basically, because at least there's a network if they want to access it as they go through their journey. So we do a lot for students, actually. I'm now thinking about it. So there's quite a lot of focus on students and sort of supporting them. And a big chunk of the money sort of comes from the membership into supporting. We've got a whole range of volunteers, so it's quite volunteer heavy as well. So we've got maybe 20 people facilitating various groups, sort of monthly spaces for the members, students, the mentoring projects that I said, and also some student gatherings, thinking of trying to get groups for people who've just qualified to think about, should I put my picture on the website?
Right.
And it just, you know what I mean? Which things you don't generally...
right.
You kind of have to...
White people don't have to think about.
White people don't have to think about that.
Yeah.
How much do we charge? Again, that's that money issue is... And I was talking, we had actually a conversation in our conference, we had someone talking about money and the money wound, and it was really interesting, and kind of unpacking that there's quite a lot really about money. Of course, yes, just charge what everyone charges. So it could be £90 or £100 or £120, who knows, quite a lot. But it's quite complicated for a lot of people of colour, certainly in the UK, I think maybe more so in the US perhaps, but the association of money and what does that mean exactly? am I just joining this game, this money game that white people are just into all the time, full time all the time, would die rather than give up that game. So there's kind of, so there's a kind of so there's that level as well, which I never really thought about before, but this speaker was sort of talking about that. And
it's so hard to separate money from attachment, because it's in this culture, we need money to live.
Yes.
For survival. So it's like an attachment need for security. And yet racism and colorism and xenophobia and othering always includes putting people on the margins of society where they have to struggle more for survival. It's like using one's identity to justify them struggling to survive culturally. So that's got to come into it when it comes to one's thoughts about pricing their services and one's thoughts about seeking help and paying for services and the practicalities of it.
Absolutely. And I think, as you say, paying for services, and I think it's something, isn't it, when your people have been used by others to make money, and then you're thinking about money now, about what you're going to charge, how's it going to be, so it's complicated. I mean, you really have to give it some thought and think it through, and sit with it, see what happens when you just sit with it in your body. And so there's quite a lot of chewing, and you need to sort of hear from other people really about their experiences. And so having these groups can be really, really helpful for people, just to sort of tease out all of these kind of imposter syndrome kind of things that go on in the mind around all of this. So we're doing what we can to sort of support the therapy community, with the aim of being this shop window, basically, that other people of color who actually, I mean, more and more, I think, are becoming more and more acceptable and more okay to see a therapist. Certainly that's my reading on things, but maybe I'm just living in this world 24/7, and maybe that's not how it is in the real world, perhaps. But I think that's kind of how it feels. Certainly young people are kind of more up for that. And just when you think, we can't, there can't be any more therapists being trained, can there? There's no capacity left for them to earn a living. That doesn't seem to stop. Training's continuing, does it?
Right. And, what you said about how the cultures that we're living within are traumatizing everyone who lives here, whether we're on the more benefiting from these values, or it's not really values, it's like systems. The ways these systems are operating benefits some and harms others more. But I think we're all harmed by existing within these systems, because something that you said before we started recording, it's coming up for me now, like, you didn't use this expression, but we're, our shared humanity, like these capitalistic, extractive, colonizing systems are dividing us, where some people are to be used and exploited by other people. And that strips away all of our connection to our shared humanity.
Yes. And in a way, that's always built into being human, isn't it? To a degree, but it really has been systematized, isn't it? To a point, especially with late stage capitalism, where it's kind of, that is, it's so encoded. It's just kind of normal now, just to, and then even thinking outside of that, even having some thoughts about how we might arrange things differently, how societies might divide resources differently. Even it's almost unthinkable. I was quite, because I'm doing some more writing at the moment, and I'm thinking about this very same thing about economics and understanding economics. And no matter how sort of race and oppression and various intersections of oppression kind of take place, and wherever they take place, in whichever country they take place in, there is something quite universal about, no matter how it looks on the outside, whether you think it's progressive or whether you think it's not. When you start looking at the resources, and I'm not just meaning kind of like gold and money, but also human resources, time, compassion, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But if we take the money, we can count that, and it doesn't matter which territory you're in. The income, for a black household is going to be a particular percentage lower than a white household, and that's pretty universal. Well, certainly in the places that count these kind of things. I'm talking about the UK and the US here in particular, and I'm just imagining this the same elsewhere. So it kind of struck me that it doesn't really matter what it looks like on the outside. The mechanisms underneath are creating the same thing, where resources go over sort of run, sort of almost like water, to one place. And so, looking at the economic system that we've inherited, that we're sort of living in, and the history of that just became quite a kind of a passion of mine, and it's a huge topic, and I'm not an economist, so I can't really. But where I went to really was, in a way, if we're going to want to make sort of any changes to some degree, it is an ethical issue, or how we think about ourselves as ethical beings kind of really needs to be reevaluated. I am a Buddhist, so that has hugely influenced my thinking on those lines. Just the way that sort of Buddhist philosophy would think about human beings in the world, and it doesn't sort of say they're any particular way. They're not naturally aggressive or naturally warlike or naturally happy, or it's all about conditions, isn't it? And about, if people are in a particular condition, they're going to behave in a particular way. And you definitely see it with capitalism. The system is set up in a certain way, and it's almost impossible to break out of that. I mean, there've been a few exceptions, but I was listening to a podcast today from about someone who created a body shop. This is a shop in the UK. Mm-hmm. Anita Roderick, I think her name was. Roddick. So in the 80s, she created this shop called the Body Shop, and she was a maverick in lots of ways. She'd be focusing on, creating a creche. She'd be focusing on the ethical, what's the word I'm using? Business as places where ethics can be played out. Maybe I could say it like that. And she did very, very, very well. And I think people are really crying out for that kind of thing. So having these ethical businesses, but it's very, 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 very difficult. And there was, I came across this saying about, you can imagine the end of the world, but we can't imagine the end of capitalism. And I kind of meditated on that for a long time. And of course, I've got 1,001 scenarios in my mind about how things can come crashing down, and the end of the world is, it's very, very vivid in my mind about what could happen. But when it comes to how capitalism in its current form could change, I just found myself completely stumped as to any ideas about how that could look. I didn't even have a germ of an idea. And so I kind of went about trying to find out all of the various ways that people have been thinking about this. And there's quite a lot out there. And I just thought it'd be really good to kind of bring all that together. Because I think you first of all need to have the kind of the idea in your mind, don't you? Or some kind of thing. Yes, we could do that. And certainly for me, I just couldn't think of anything. I just couldn't I couldn't think how the world could be organized any differently than it is now. So that was my lack of knowledge on economics for starters. And so I think teaching ourselves about economics, how it works, is certainly a good start, isn't it? Reading up on all of the various different ways that businesses could operate, or how economics could change, and maybe also thinking maybe more deeply about how to practice ethics, and really to keep that in the forefront of one's mind when they're thinking about building a business or anything.
Yeah, that is so important now. The way things are in this country, the U.S., there's many of us are thinking about what things are going to look like, because a lot of our systems are being dismantled, and not in the ways that those of us who wish for, oppressive systems to be dismantled, they're just being made more oppressive. So that's quite concerning. And many people are terrified and also being harmed now. And when trying to envision a different, more equitable and just way of living as a culture, it's hard when the feeling is like what is happening right now is very traumatizing to everyone who's living here. So, whether we're observing and not directly impacted today, or we're horrified at something that we are specifically experiencing right now, or someone we love, someone we live with, it's always easier to think of all the horrible things that could happen than it is to envision a safer future. I think our systems that's what we know from our work and from polyvagal theory, that our systems are looking out for signs of danger and trying to protect us all the time. And so thank you for what you're doing in that way, and what you're doing with Barton, and you're writing with this book, talking about these conversations that can be so overwhelming and uncomfortable, but also are moving us, shifting things. If we're not having these conversations, it's just supporting the status quo. And my training as a social worker is like, who's benefiting if we keep things the way they are?
Yeah. I mean, certainly my system and your system, probably most of America, their nervous systems in their bodies are, just on high alert, more so than ever before. Well, not ever before, but certainly, for a while. And
during my lifetime,
the idea. I mean, I remember, in the maybe early 80s, kind of sitting in my car thinking, oh man, is that Reagan going to push the button? So I was terrified at that time.
Yeah, I know. I was a kid then, so I've been worrying ever since.
And that worry has kind of subsided, and sort of it's come back in some way. And I think, the the book, the Transforming Race Conversations, is just that word conversation kind of feels like, oh, maybe it's just, two people talking to each other about something. And I wanted to sort of get away from that. I know the book is called Race Conversations, but
yeah.
But we're having a conversation. I just wanted to sort of just kind of really say as much as I could about how much we're having those conversations without talking.
Mm-hmm.
So the nonverbal aspects of those conversations, and really paying attention to that. Because what we're trying to work with is trauma, isn't it? It's sort of generational trauma that's over the generations that just get handed down non-verbally, mainly from parents to children, and then those children have their children. Ways of being, ways of looking, ways of gazing, ways of being close or not close, kind of basics in terms of how our bodies are with each other. And we could be having a conversation about football or something, and we could be fine together. We could be regulated, feel okay. And then race or some kind of oppression, something comes in to the field. Someone might say something, or it might be a news report on the radio, or something's happened, or certainly in a training course, someone talks about their experience. And then all of a sudden, the sort of the body kind of completely takes over, and people are left. They've left. They've left their ventral vagal, and they're they might be just hanging on to it for dear life. They could look calm on the outside, but there's a lot of work going on inside, and it doesn't really matter what race identity you've been ascribed or you claim for yourself. It doesn't. Obviously there is differences in how it gets played out, but the nervous system is still working really, really hard, and our bodies are just not capable of holding that material. And in fact, we've been trained to not look at it, to not see it, because once you start looking at it, then you're going to have to start reevaluating sort of the ethical framework of past generations and yourself. You have an image of yourself as an okay person, and then when you start looking at this material, you think, well, maybe I'm not that okay. And that can be, just that very thought can be enough to trigger people into kind of being dysregulated.
Very much.
And so the book is an invitation really to think about the nonverbal aspects of race, to really think about that, and maybe what you can do to meet it. And the way I've been working in that way for years and years and years, I might go into a training institution and do maybe a bit of training, or I might be giving a talk, or I might be doing whatever I'm doing, and I'm meeting a mind which I disagree with profoundly. And what do I do with that? And the more I look at that mind that just seems stuck on something incomprehensible to me, it doesn't even make sense. And then I realize, well, why would it make sense? It would make sense if they're in ventral vagal, of course they would, but that's not what's happening. They're sort of somewhere else. Actually, their minds are in defense of some description. So meaning making goes out the window then, doesn't it? So, okay, I can let go of this idea that it needs to make sense. And so it's a series of kind of letting go of just sort of being with those kind of states of mind, and also knowing that within my mind there are those states of mind as well. It's not as if I'm on the outside looking in. I'm fine and everyone else is just crazy. There's craziness in my mind I'm in this system, and if I wasn't acting out the program, then there'd be something wrong. Probably wouldn't be very human. So there's kind of lots to work with. But basically, I'm just sort of building my capacity to hold that material. And people can do that. People can. I think there's a series of things you need to sort of have. You need to sort of cover some bases. You need to have a sense of the history of how we got here, depending on what the oppression that you're looking at is. If you're looking at race, the history of race. How did it come about? What were the things that were happening? And that we, generally speaking, most people don't really have much of a sense of that history.
Right.
And you have to, if you want to find it out, you kind of have to work at it. It's not going to be given to you. You have to do some work. And
we're actually indoctrinated with some different stories that we believe are the history, and then we have to unlearn that. That's part of the decolonizing, right?
You have to unlearn the focus, and then so it's not an easy thing. Luckily, there's the internet and YouTube, so there are lots of material. So people so there's no shortage of material, no shortage of people talking about this stuff, but there is a shortage of people coming to it and kind of taking it in. So I think you need to have some sense of that. I think you also need to have a sense of trauma, I think, and how it works. And there's some kind of in-depth knowledge or anything, but there's a sense that your body and this other person's body that's in front of you are caught in some kind of game, some kind of nervous system game. Now, so regardless of what you think about, or how you feel you are in this, where you are in this, you're going to get caught up anyway. So I think for me, that has been quite liberating, really, that I don't need to think about it all the time. I don't need to find an answer. What I need to do instead is just to be able to hold the experience of someone else who is oppressed in some way. I wouldn't say that's all I have to do. That sounds quite simplistic, but it's, in a way, that is the task. The task is, can I stay regulated? Can I stay in ventral vagal and still be with this person? And if I can, the chances are very, very high that I'm going to say something or do something sensible and helpful. If I come out of that, and I'm in a different system, there's the chances are very, very high that I'll say something that's wrong, that's not meeting them, is protecting me. But that is a nervous system thing. It's really like training for the marathon, or training for for going to the gym and doing 50 press ups. You wouldn't dream of doing 50 press ups. First off, you probably do yourself an injury and probably never want to go back to the gym at all. So you do need to start light with a few press ups and then kind of keep working until your body is capable of doing it. That's the analogy, I think, is kind of a useful analogy. So it really kind of takes us away from our tendency, which is like, if we can just work it out, if we could just find the answer, there's a sort of magic sort of answer somewhere, and then once we get it, the world will reveal itself in all its glory and things will be fine. That never happens in trauma, does it? As we know. So it's just kind of moving away from the verbal, or the importance of the verbal, and sort of maybe moving more towards the non-verbal and what that means for people. And I've been talking about race here, but we could talk about many different oppressions. And just because you're able to hold, I might be able to hold that sort of race dialogue in my body a little bit better than I did a number of years ago, doesn't necessarily mean I can hold another oppression gender oppression, and I can't hold it in that way. I need to do the work for that. But certainly doing some work in some area is going to give you some benefits all round. So so that's the focus of the book, and I'm trying to and hopefully my new book will be more about I still want to bring the body in as much as I can, and it's pretty similar, but just in terms of economics and holding all of the different kind of narratives there are around money and consumerism, and do we really need that car? Do we really need all these things to make to live? So it's an invitation really to sort of think about the body in the economic world. It's a tricky one. I'm not sure I'm going to get there, but we'll give it a go. Yeah.
Well, it sounds really needed, and again, I'm very grateful for what you're doing, and everything that can help bring us to a different place, I think, is really, really valuable and important, especially because many people just aren't able to see right now. And this isn't criticism of anyone. I mean, it's just the time we're in. It's hard to see what could be next that might be able to be kinder and better rather than just a continuation of more violence and more oppression and more exploitation. That's not working, and we need different ways. So I wish we had more time. This has been such a lovely conversation, and I'm really grateful to you, as I keep saying, for sharing your time here.
My pleasure.
I think for me, it's been very thought-provoking, and I hope it is for those who are listening. So if people want to learn more about Barton, where can they go?
They can go to our webpage. That would probably be the easiest. www.baatn.org.uk. And we're on Instagram and
Barton, not Barton. Sorry.
No, it depends. It depends if you're in.
That's like English accent, American accent confusion on my part. Sorry about that. Barton.
No.
Barton.
I think there's different regions in the UK, and they all have a different way of saying it. Some say Barton. And so there's I'll take whatever pronunciation you've got. But we've got certainly on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and all those kind of places, so you can kind of see, you can get links to those places on our website, and come visit and have a look at the articles, have a look at the blog posts, check out all the videos and everything. If you're interested in the sort of colonial experience and looking at that history, which I think for certainly for some people in the US who feel quite learned about history, there's a few things there which might be of interest as well to people in the US. So that's probably the first place to go.
Beautiful. And from what you said, I just want to add that, when we here in the US are thinking about the way things are, it's like the history of this country, blah, blah, blah. But if you pay attention to the history of the UK and what's happened there, that tells you a lot about our history. And we don't learn as much about that in school because we're learning, the version of we broke away from that country. And
yes,
but it's so ingrained in our culture to be influenced by the whole, the British Empire that created this colonization experience of what we now call the United States. So at least that's the name for now. We'll see if it becomes something different.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because I know that, the narrative is, okay, we broke away from those guys because they had kings and queens. We don't want that. We want to.
They were oppressive. We are free.
We don't want oppression. We just want to just do our own thing, and we're going to fight for it. And then you find out that it's becoming more and more, and maybe even more so than what they were running away from. And
yes, I know it's
very salient.
Very, very true. It just helps, I think, have a different perspective. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I think it's really great. I mean, and I know I guess in Europe, it's sort of slightly easier to move from one country to the next, and you go to France, but when you do that, it does completely changes your view of where you live.
Yeah.
Yes. We don't do things like this. I know America has probably got lots of different places where that can happen, moving from place to place. But certainly, moving somewhere where it's just completely different, a different language as well,
right.
Starters.
More open-mindedness to be able to see different ways of living, different culture. And
having those different perspectives, you can't but take that on. And especially when you live it, when you're kind of there, you're not just thinking about it when you're actually there. I think, but yes. There's lots of work to be done all over.
Yes,
for sure.
So your book, where is the best place to find it?
I'm sure it's on Amazon. It's actually published by Norton, so Norton do have a website, so maybe that might be a good place to go. Okay. Norton Professional website. So that would probably be the place to go to get it. Yeah.
Great. I'll link to their website and your book on there, and the Barton website. And do you have your own website that you want people to know about as well, or just Barton?
I do, but there's not much on it now, apart from some information about the book. But yes, there is eugeneellis.co.uk, which you could go to.
Okay.
Also, there is the kind of going to give a shout out to the book that we put together, Therapy in Color, it's called. And we managed to keep the U in color. But
spelled it correctly.
It was really interesting actually doing the US version and then having to sort of go through and change things. And there's a little bit in me thinking, why can't they just have it just as it is?
I know. Why not? Why we can't? Can't decipher this foreign language that has a couple of extra letters or different spellings or a few different terms.
But
we need things to be so Americanized for us. It's got to be our way.
Well, it was a journey, but I'm really glad I did it as well, because it's kind of just opened up things a little bit as well. But Therapy Color is a really great book. And
where do we find that book?
Well, that is published in the UK. It's published by Jessica Kingsley. I'm not sure if they have a US kind of website. I'm sure they probably do. So you can go to the Jessica Kingsley website or on Amazon.
Okay.
And there's, and if you're a therapist, it's kind of there's a sort of a little section on being a therapist of color or working with those client group. If you're doing supervision. And also, if you're sort of potential client, different chapters really there about what you might want, what you might find. If you find, if you're working with a therapist of a particular kind, certainly someone who's associated with Barton anyway, they'll be looking at obviously the regular theories, but also some bringing in the experience of marginalization and the impact that has on mental well-being. So that's quite there's a lot of different people talking there from different heritages as well. And again,
sounds like a wonderful resource. I definitely want to link to that too, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's become, I think, certainly my book and that book have become kind of like on the reading list of many of the training courses that happen here in the UK.
Congratulations. That's a wonderful, valuable contribution. This is part of it, like how to create that new, better way. This is all part of it. So
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Eugene, for
Thank you for
spending time with me today on Therapy Chat. I'm so appreciative of everything that you've shared, and I can't wait for people to hear it.
Well, I appreciate you asking, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Therapy Chat with your host, Laura Reagan, lcsw-c. For more information, please visit therapychatpodcast.com.